Welcome to the House by Basor podcast. I'm your host, William, and join me today will be Derek.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello. That was my copycat of Derek.
And on this episode, we're discussing Copycat, which is a 90s serial killer movie. So it was 1995. It had Sigourney Weaver, Holly Hunter, Dermot Mulroney, Harry Connick Jr., Will Patton. So some people that you remember from the 90s, because Harry Connick Jr. was also in Independence Day, and this came out before that.
Was he in that?
He was Will Smith's, like, co-pilot buddy guy.
Was he Mongoose, essentially?
Yeah.
Okay.
The one he these blew up.
Yeah. So he was pretty much Mongoose in that movie.
No, he
Mongoose
was Goose.
dies. Yeah, Goose
Oh
dies.
my God.
Mongoose, the
Yeah,
Mexican-
so when did 7 come out? 7 was...
like 99, 97?
Was it the same year?
No, I think it was probably
No.
a little later.
7 was 95 too.
Oh, it was.
So
Wow.
these movies both came out around the same time.
Now, do you think this one was influenced a little bit more by Silence of the Lambs?
Oh, definitely.
Because that's kind of why I thought. I mean, I think this is a good movie, but I just was watching. I was like, I definitely think this.
Do we do full spoilers? I mean, this isn't one that I hadn't really even was on my radar. So, do you want to do like partial, not spoilers?
So,
I think
at least like a short part.
the
maybe.
movie is currently streaming. If you're in the U.S., it's streaming on Netflix, which is where we all watch it, right?
Yeah.
And it's
I
also
went to an illegal site just.
Just to go, yeah.
it's also
Yes, so I just-
available for rent from other services like Amazon Prime or different places. So you can watch this easily if you're in the U.S. It's on Netflix. You can check it out. And like I said, it's from 1995. It was directed by John Amiel, and John Amiel also directed The Core,
Which is not good.
Entrapment, that Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones movie.
I remember that.
Let's see what else. Some different TV stuff. Oh, that show Aquarius that David Duchovny did. So somebody that's done consistent work
which is a
since
serial
then.
killer show, right? That David Duchovny show, Aquarius.
Yeah, it was about like the
Yeah.
Manson murders or something. He was a detective in the 60s. So it looked like his feature film directing career wasn't super huge after that, because he still did like The Entrapment and The Core, but they don't take a lot of TV after that, which I'd love to direct some TV. That'd be fun. But this is a movie that I really hadn't heard much about.
Me neither.
Because you would think Sigourney Weaver in a serial killer movie, but like looking at the box office, it didn't make a ton of money.
But it got good reviews, like
Because the budget was $20 million and it made $32 million. That's back in the 90s when stuff had, much longer lives on cable and video and rental service, or not rental services, like rental buildings like Blockbuster in your local. Because in 95, that would have been when there was still like Hollywood Video, West Coast Video,
Planet Hollywood.
Roadrunner Video, like all these different video chains, like Red Giraffe. All these places still existed that the sole thing they did was they sold or they rented out VHS tapes, and they sold overpriced candy and popcorn.
and probably crappy McFarlane action figures. He's always had them there too.
Yeah, so this is, like I said, this is a movie that I had never heard of before.
You know,
neither.
I only reason I even watch it as I'd watch it Abducted in Plain Sight, and that was on Netflix. It's a documentary, very interesting. But then that was suggested, and I was like, oh, okay, and because it has Sigourney Weaver in it, and I was like, okay, there's Sigourney Weaver and Holly Hunter, like,
They're not at that time when they were,
yeah,
they
pretty
weren't
relevant. So like, oh, I'll watch it, and then. It was just funny because like Henry Connick, whatever his name
Henry
is,
Connick Jr.
Henry Connick Jr., which apparently like middle-aged women like love him because he has a TV show or something now, or he does like a midday talk show. But he's like the ultimate just white trash redneck in this.
Yeah.
Almost to a fault. It's almost like they should have had him play Carnage and they would have been okay.
Well, I mean, so without like getting into all the heavy spoilers yet, so
Well, I mean, it's not that
the
much.
basic idea is that there is a serial killer who in his serial killings is imitating the murder style of past famous serial killers. So he would go and kill a couple of, women in a way that another killer had, decades prior. And then his next kill, he would replicate the kill of like Jeffrey Dahmer or something.
Yeah.
So
Ted Bundy, Jeffrey
and
Dahmer.
Sigourney Weaver's character is a researcher on serial killers who is an author, who experienced like a traumatic event that kind of had her being an agoraphobic who didn't want to leave the house. And then Holly Hunter and Dermot Mulroney's characters are detectives who are tasked with figuring it out. And from that era, I'm assuming like
Set in San Francisco.
Yeah.
yeah, and set back in that era, and there was some internet chat room stuff that looks pretty quaint, and a lot of the technology in the movie when they talk about things is pretty accurate. Because I didn't remember hearing, because a lot of that era, you had the net,
Yeah.
and these other things where computers are doing stuff that they still don't do today, and that when the stuff they talked about, like when it showed her opening up like a file, there's a video file, is like actually the correct like file format and stuff. And it's like, well, at least it was somewhat accurate.
The webcam quality was great.
Oh, yeah.
That was just like...
Yeah, that was unrealistic.
one thing I noticed that they didn't do in this film, like they always say in films, you never hear somebody say goodbye on the phone when they hang up. I think they were trying to start the trend whenever she was like chatting and then she just leaves. Like you never see a person say BRB in a movie.
Yeah.
Because she just like starts a conversation and then just gets up and walks away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, so the overall movie has a little bit of that type of stuff in it that kind of dates it. So somebody who watches it today,
especially the aforementioned video, there's some editing on that is just like the most 90s thing you could ever
and
watch.
two, like I'm not sure how easily someone could put together essentially like a GIF or a GIF or whatever back then with stuff, like because that back then took a little bit more technical know-how than it does now to take a picture and like animate stuff happening in it. But just very much like dramatic TV or dramatic movie type stuff. Yeah. But so your overall plot is pretty straightforward. There's a killer that is copying other killers and killing people, and of course he gets tangled up with our main characters. But this movie does take some pretty sharp turns left with some things. I'm like, I wasn't expecting that to happen. But like I'd say like the biggest, and it even has kind of like a Hannibal Lecter moment where they bring in like a criminal that is in prison to try to help with the investigation and stuff like that. And it does feel quite derivative of like that era.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I just wonder like because that was so highly successful.
It was a big minus for me just because like if you are seemingly closely mimicking, like you know what I mean, like an Academy Award winning film that's like one of the best serial killer films ever, and then two, to have Seven come out that year that was so fresh but also the same type of thing, you know what I mean, like this film was in a bad spot.
Yeah, and I just wonder, but it's just weird because you have like people that I would associate as like big names at the time, especially with Sigourney Weaver. Like it's just kind of a weird, like you said, it's kind of probably found a weird spot, but it just kind of with her being in it, I just kind of surprised it didn't do. It got good reviews, it just didn't do successful at the box office.
Yeah, because like you said, like so the era that it came out in, it's post Silence of the Lambs, and
Was Silence 91?
Yes, or
I thought it was
let's see.
93.
No, Silence of the Lambs. It was either 90 or 91. It was 91. So it was 91, and then Copycat came out in 95, the same year as Seven. And I would say that, I mean, obviously, if a movie's come out in the same year back in that era, especially they were in production, similar time frame. So it wasn't like they were following that lead. But I think
they're different enough. They're not.
But I think they have
This and Seven are totally opposites almost.
Yeah, I think that they have the unfortunate distinction. So I think that Silence of the Lambs kind of popularized and was like the zenith of serial killer films to that point. And then Seven was kind of like a reboot on it, on the kind of genre, and kind of changed it because too in the time after that you had the X-Files, which I think was pretty heavily influenced by Silence of the Lambs, especially with Scully and some of the stuff with that. So I think that you had like a number of things that had done serial killer stories, because this could have easily been an episode of the X-Files of a serial killer that mimics past like well-known
or
killers.
CSI, any sort of show like that.
Yeah, any of those shows now, those procedurals. But having it as a movie, like the thing that I think that I took away from this movie that made it to where I had a little bit of trouble connecting with it is none of the character, like, Silence of the Lambs, you get invested in Clarice and you like her and you follow her and you're invested in, her success and her safety and you care about it. In Seven, they're able to bring you with like Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt. They're able to kind of get you invested in those characters, and they're really not want anything bad to happen to them. You know, and even like Gwyneth Paltrow, who's in that, not in it much, you still like don't want something bad to happen to her. In this movie, I think they thought that you would feel that, but never really earned it from you.
Well, I think they casted people that you would like. So if you do feel that way, it's only because you like
your affinity for Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah.
I wondered if they were doing Holly Hunter too, just to have another like law enforcement agent with a southern accent. You know what I mean? Like that's immediately jumped out. I mean, I love Holly Hunter. Yeah,
I like her too. So it's like you have those two actresses in there. I think they put them in there because you might just like them for who they are, even if their characters aren't fully developed or greatly. So I think you're kind of right because it kind of. I think too, the way that it was, since they kind of split it like the leads between two people, you never really get to like them quite as much as you would if it's just on one person.
Well,
and you would argue that even like Hannibal Lecter is a lead in Silence of the Lambs, and not. I mean, and I think it's just easy to point out what the differences are, and maybe why this one didn't work as well as Silence of the Lambs is, Hannibal Lecter that was based on a book, and it felt like it was so well researched, and his character was so fleshed out, no pun intended. But this just felt very much like these are almost like a Batman villain type. You know what I mean? Almost like they're just as kind of a stock, and like even Harry Connick Jr. Like as what was his name?
He was just so over the top with his redneck,
especially towards the end.
Daryl Lee Cullum.
Daryl Lee, yeah, he looked like a Ernest in a porno, like a porno version of Ernest towards the end, especially when he's like in the camera, like when he talks to Vern.
Yeah,
See, I just kept expecting like an Arrested Development type scenario, like where they just leave the room and somebody walks in. He's like, "Hey, boy."
Yeah,
and he's like, "Wait, am I the boy?"
But one thing I thought about immediately though is because this was also during like the Venom and Carnage era, how he didn't get casted at some point as Carnage, because like that's what I would associate Carnage being like, is a guy like that. So that was the first thing I thought of it being 95 because you had the Maximum Carnage stuff going on around then. And
how does this film open? It opens with her at the symposium.
She's giving a lecture.
She's doing a lecture, and she sees Harry Connick Jr. in the
Yes, that's right.
audience.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it opens okay. It opens all right. She's giving a lecture. You are given some background on serial killers, and that's kind of interesting, but it also does feel very much like they're like trying to drop some knowledge on the audience. You know what I mean? Like as much as Silence of the Lamb educated you, but it wasn't up front.
But see, now men would just get mad at this movie because she pretty much point out like which are facts that like
serial killers,
like 20 to 35 white males are the like 95% chance of committing.
Yeah.
Like no, they're not. Blah, blah, blah. It just I feel like that scene would go vastly different now.
Yeah.
And there's also like a weird scene where like they're panning around people in the audience. She's like, "Look at you, like, y'all look so good." And there's like some really dopey looking guy.
Yeah.
And it's like of everybody you're going to pick that. Yeah.
So then
patronizing.
So then after this, so then she goes into the bathroom. She gets hung up and essentially captured, and you don't know what happens, and then it flashes forward like 13 months later or something, and later you find out, okay, well he was captured and convicted and all that. But then we jump right over to the law enforcement agents, and it does feel like almost. They may have both taken this role, Holly Hunter and Sigourney Weaver, because of Silence of the Lambs and the accolades to that film. Where it's like Sigourney Weaver seemed to give her all as far as being agoraphobe and everything, but she did fine in it with what she had. It was a little over the top at times. And it didn't pay off. Like I thought maybe, like they do very little payoff at the end. Where she does go outside on the roof. But I really thought this film was going to be, and I'm not damning it for what it's not. It just feels like they kind of started off on one foot because they thought, oh, this would make for an interesting character, or this allows us to keep her in the house. I really thought she was going to have to come outside of the house earlier on to kind of help solve this murder, and it would help her overcome that and her past demons. Like I really thought that was like an obvious choice, and it wasn't. But even what they did wasn't more interesting or anything like that.
And two, something to add to like so Derek, your confusion on like I don't know if you talked about on the episode or before, but like, oh, was it Helen Hunt or Holly Hunter?
Yeah.
Well, Sigourney Weaver's character is named Helen.
Okay. Because
So
I
I think
kept
that-
saying Helen Hunt,
But it was really funny because at one point she's basically like telling her like assistant, her helpful assistant guy who is gay, and that's only a plot point because like she's like, I miss men. And then he's like, well, I'm not enough for you. But She should have been like Helen Horny.
What was his name in the movie? It's like Helen Horny Michael.
And then like bring me a man, because she even at one point she's like, I just miss men.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you can.
I mean, again, that's like, okay, well, obviously she's gonna have sex with the, you know what I mean?
So then,
Ultimate 90s
Dermot Mulroney's
because he's
character.
like this guy. Because I went and looked at him, like he's a very familiar face, but he wasn't.
He reminds me of like him and Eric Roberts, despite the like a little bit of age gap. They could have played a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah, but he's just a guy that was in a bunch of different stuff in the '90s. But he wasn't anything like, he never became anything big. But it just he's
a consistent worker. You know, he's been good and stuff, and has been around. And I've seen him a lot. I think he was in romantic comedies and stuff with Julia Roberts and things. So he's been in a lot of successful stuff.
He's a very familiar face. You probably just couldn't put your finger on what movie he was in for sure.
So this film splits the time a lot. You know, we instead of having Sigourney Weaver is essentially the Hannibal Lecter type. You know, she's assisting the police officers, and then they it's like they split that character in half, and yeah, it's, I don't know, just something about it. And I think the big thing was in some films like Seven, there's the suspense comes from them almost capturing the killer. You know what I mean? Or almost being on the trail.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think we ever see any of the victims die in that film. You know, I think so in this, we see the victims die, but there's really no suspense given there. Like they aren't, it doesn't seem the director is too concerned with really thrilling the audience at all through a lot of these murders. Like it's almost like, why even show hardly any of it? I guess they're trying to develop the killer's MO and everything, which I get that, but I feel like there was some missed opportunities to kind of help the pacing of the film if they were to make those films a little bit more, those scenes a little bit more exciting. Because really, I mean, the only time like you feel any danger on set or on screen is, you know, a couple times when Sigourney Weaver is in peril in her house, and then a random scene inside the police office or police station. Yeah. Where the other officer gets taken hostage. It's just like,
because that was maybe that was what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So I mean, do we want to go into spoilers?
Yeah. So we can move into spoilers. So basically, it's on Netflix if you want to check it out. But I think we kind of need to get into spoilers.
I would say, you know, if you're interested in just checking this out because you're interested in mid-90s serial killer films, that's totally fine. But I don't think it's like a must-watch or anything. I think the reviews are really high, and mine do not line up with that.
I wonder if they're just high because what was out at the time.
Maybe, yeah. Mine did not line up with that.
But like it wasn't.
Well, because the Metacritic, so there's not a ton of reviews. There's only 19 on Metacritic. It's got a 54 on IMDb. It's 6.6 out of 10. And, you know, I would say, yeah, if you're interested in like a 90s serial killer drama that's kind of a lesser than like your top tier of, you know, like your Sevens and Silence of the Lambs, like
but
this
still has like
this, and those are huge films to be stacked up against as well.
And I mean, and, you know, you're talking about like two movies that were, you know, defining movies of that decade. Like this movie's not on that level at all. But it is something that's just kind of like a time capsule movie of because there's some stuff where I've sat there and like I'll watch and like, how is this not talked about more? And this really isn't one of those.
No.
I mean, like I said, you know, Sigourney Weaver is always interesting to watch, and Holly Hunter I like in things. I mean, so it's got a good cast. It's just like the villain's not very charismatic.
I think it's lacking the villain. It's not particularly well written, and you know, it's not directed to its full potential. I don't think as well.
Where they mess up the villain is if they had just maybe had Henry Connick Jr. in it more, because he was at a 10, like his character was so over the top, but then the one you get that's actually committing the murders is so subdued.
Well, at least with Harry Connick Jr., you remember him a little bit.
Yeah, you remember him because he's just so ridiculous. He's like every Southern.
Well, you remember the Coke bottle glasses from the other guy at least.
Yeah.
So we'll move into spoilers now.
Yeah,
right?
move into spoilers.
Because the actual killer looks like he came off of Revenge of the Nerds.
Or like a Gap ad.
Yeah, maybe.
So here's the thing. Didn't do, you know, I'm not pointing out like he did like a terrible job or anything. It's just I think that the script didn't really seed much of him in. And then it really, when he shows up, it's just kind of chewing the scenery. But you really haven't had any build up for that to really land.
It really does feel like they thought of a concept of, oh, what if we just have somebody that recreates all these like greatest hits of serial killers essentially. But for me, you know, again, when you have a serial killer film that is deeply rooted in serial killer psychology and how they work and everything, I mean, that I think that helps those films because it is more scary because it's like, oh, this is how humans operate. You know what I mean? Where this is how the human mind operates when somebody is does a pattern of killings. But this almost like explains the importance of that and kind of how those patterns don't get broken typically, but then also does a 180 on it where it feels completely fictional because he does, you know what I mean? Because he is breaking the patterns because he's mimicking. And that's, I don't know, that made me feel like, oh, this feels so much more like a way more popcorn version of serial killer fare.
Well, and two, there is like, Derek, I'm sure you appreciate, there's like a throwaway line where they talk about like nobody there has worked on a serial killer case before. And then Holly Hunter asked like her boss, like, well, didn't you work on the Zodiac case?
Yeah.
Did you all catch the victim or did you all catch the suspect yet? And he's like, whatever, shut up. So like,
doesn't exist.
yes, like, so the movie, you know, it sets up these different characters.
He says no, and then he opens up his desk where he has all these Zodiac scribblings that he's doing.
So
He's the killer.
yeah, so you have, so you mentioned before, so is Sigourney Weaver's character where she just basically is like, I'm horny. So Dermot Mulroney's character Ruben, who's like Holly Hunter's like younger, detective partner guy. That like there's a weird thing like Will Patton. So he was recently in Halloween as a sheriff.
Will Patton's character is so weirdly written in this because like he is usually a very good character actor. Like he's great in Gone in 60 Seconds, probably the highlight of his career. Wasn't he in The Punisher? He got killed in it. I can't remember.
Because wasn't he in Days of Thunder?
Yeah, I think he was in Days of Thunder. I just remember him the most from Gone in 60 Seconds. And he was like an Armageddon too, I think, and Armageddon or whatever. But
yeah, Armageddon.
All the characters feel like they are not fully developed. Like there's so many characters,
him particularly though, because like he's been in so much stuff, and he's usually good. Like but he's always like the same kind of character. Whereas this one, like him and like Honey Hunter, did they have something going on?
No, they were exes.
Yeah, I know, but just the way that it was, like, he really hated her new partner, but they weren't really romantically involved at all.
And he kept saying, like, are you two together now?
Yeah, it was just very weird.
Like, I mean, honestly, I think that detective partners that date would probably be frowned upon.
Yeah. And then he was obviously into Sigourney Weaver.
And so Dermot Mulroney's character, so Ruben, was like had a weird flirtation with her.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I mean, maybe but then he's like, well, you fit into the category of witness, so I can't do that. And she's like, oh,
I'm so sad.
It's like, solve this crime so we can bone. But you know, he there's also points where it kind of leads you to be like, oh, is he involved in this?
Yes.
Because they do state that one of the criminal or like one of the victims they find has DNA in her from two men. And they're like, oh, okay. So then I was like, oh, maybe the character of Ruben is involved with the killer, like somehow, because it did kind of play him a little bit weird for a while.
Yeah.
Because he knew a lot about computers and all this stuff and how all that stuff worked, and but then the kind of weird turn that comes was midway through the movie.
It was like third act,
like early third act. He's in the police station, and there's like a Asian gangster.
Yeah, Bill Patton, whatever his name is.
Will Patton.
Will Patton is there. There's like, you know, because
he took his gun out of the holster. He put it in the drawer.
But for whatever reason, but he didn't lock it because a fight broke out.
So then he leaves with his gun in the unlocked drawer, and then the guy slides over, gets the gun out of the drawer, and hides it on himself. And then when Ruben comes over to finish off what they're doing at them, he pulls the gun on Ruben.
No, Ruben is like giving people food. He's like, "Oh, you want a donut? I got a donut. I'll unlock
That's
it."
also a funny element to this.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but then Ruben gets taken hostage
by the gangster dude,
and then as they're walking out, Holly Hunter sees him. Now, in the beginning of the movie, they were shooting targets, and she was talking about shooting the shoulder because if you hit some type of nerve, it causes the arm to go limp. Well, she does that, but then and it gets Ruben released, but then the guy picks the gun up with the other hand and then shoots and kills him, which is really weird because he shoots him once and then he doesn't shoot anybody else.
Well, he shoots him, like, I guess the way it's framed, he shoots him like right through the heart from behind or something.
Also, something else I noticed about that scene was that he doesn't drop the box of donuts the entire time. It's like some really method acting there.
Well, there was one time years ago, I was in Ohio for something, and I went and got some pizza.
Did you shoot somebody?
No.
Okay.
No. Let me finish the story, Derek. I was like, a few people were hanging out, so I went and got pizza. So I was walking out of this pizza, I think Pizza Hut or something. This is the only thing closed. So I have like 4 boxes of pizza, and it's like, it was in January, so it's like really snowy and slick and icy. So I walk out, slip on the pavement, fall straight on my back, but I was able to, like, my hands were like a gimbal, because it stayed, like, the pizza stayed perfectly, horizontal, so I didn't drop the pizza boxes. I didn't get them smushed up in the box. They were fine. I was worried about the pizza, not myself. So he was like that with those donuts.
So it wasn't a Domino's, right? You didn't have pizza insurance.
Yeah. No. And he's even more committed because he has had one donut.
And see, that was back in the era when Domino's didn't give a crap. No, but
they just stabbed you and came back in the store.
Yeah, I mean it
was a weird plot.
Well, so they really
it was very, very weird, and it feels like the relationship between him and Sigourney Weaver was just to kind of like, make her care more about his loss. You know what I mean?
But
like,
it was kind of played off as not that important.
I know
it's
such a weird
What
weird
happened
thing.
too is, like, they were trying to think, how can we
Get him out of the equation.
get him out of the equation to have the setup at the end? Because, like, if it was 2 of them that went, because, like, the end of the movie is just
the
like
killer
the beginning.
kidnaps Sigourney Weaver and
takes her to the-
replicates
yeah,
her
takes her
being
to the-
hung in the bathroom.
Takes her to the same place. So it's like, if you had both of them go in there, then I think that it would be much, like, that scene couldn't happen.
It'd be
So that was
relatively implausible that with 2 people with firearms.
Did you all read the trivia about the original ending?
No.
This isn't the film, so but apparently the original ending, he kidnaps Holly Hunter and Sigourney Weaver goes rescues her in a school or something.
Yeah.
And people in the audience didn't like it. They're like, well, if she's agoraphobia, like, why would she go out and rescue her? Like, you know what I mean? Of
Yeah.
all people.
Yeah.
And then so they reshot it because you felt like the ending of this did feel like, okay, cool. Like we're looping back around. We're seeing that first scene again. Like I like that element to it, and I thought that was like a good part of the film. So it's interesting that wasn't in there from the start.
But something that's weird though is the little photo they use when you're actually going to watch the movie on Netflix is Sigourney Weaver with a gun in the red dress,
which isn't in
the movie. So I wonder if that is from that, because I remember watching that. Or I just remember seeing that, and I watched the movie, and I was like, "That never happened."
Like, I never got to see Sigourney shoot a gun.
Yeah, because I myself, when I saw that image, when I had to pause the movie and went away, I came back. I was like, "So when is this going to show up in the third act?"
Yeah,
and then it just never did. I'm like, "Well."
So I assume that's probably from that.
And I know her partner or her Sigourney Weaver's assistant and everything. Like he dies, essentially not a big thing either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like she doesn't really care.
He
like,
did.
I don't know. And you did feel like it was going to be the officer he was going to go after. Like they seemed like they really kind of packed this film a little bit with too much and didn't do enough with it. Like they should have stripped out like multiple characters, I think, just to give more time and more weight to the ones that were like important to the story to actually make it matter.
Because I think like a big difference between this and say like Silence of the Lambs, and Silence of the Lambs, like with Buffalo Bill, like you do get interaction with him throughout the movie. And you kind of get a baseline. So even if you think he's a despicable human being, you at least understand a little bit more, and you get more investment in what's going on.
Yeah, you might not agree with what he's doing, but there is rationale for the way he thinks. Like, with this one,
from the get-go, the movie's not obscuring his identity to the audience.
Yeah.
You're being invited to see what he's doing. But then in this movie, in Copycat, they kind of obscure the killer from the audience for a good portion of it. I guess to kind of build up a little bit of suspense of like, well, who is it? But then it just kind of, once it shows who he is, like he's not connected to any of the characters in any way.
No, but there's 2 things we need to talk about real quick. One, I love the security footage where he's like filming these people, and then he puts it on his computer and they blowing up the women's faces.
Oh, yes,
and it's like
yeah.
it's just a big pixel, like you can't see anything out of it.
Yeah,
and then he's like, I just really love that because it's like ultimate 90s technology. Because like now like cameras are high enough quality that you could probably actually blow it up and be able to see something. But he's like blowing up so much, it's like you can't see anything. And
enhance.
But at least when they did the enhancement on that, it wasn't like a lot of these movies would do even now, where like they enhance it in a exponential degree and it still looks crystal clear, which is impossible. And I also liked the video that he sent of the really crappy like editing.
Yeah.
That is just so 90s because like it
The
transforms.
bathtub one or the other one? Okay.
Because it turns like the girl's head into a skull and she's like meh, 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 and flies off.
And then like the body's like flopping out of the tub and stuff.
Yeah, it's like that was so 90s. Like I don't know, it just definitely made you feel like, oh, this is most certainly 1995.
Yeah, I mean, so it's one of those kind of weird scenarios where this movie came out the same year as Seven. Seven feels pretty timeless when you watch it.
Yeah.
Because even if it came out today, it wouldn't have changed all
I mean,
that much.
the world they set that film in almost feels like a world of like, like a gothic
noir.
noir film. Like, it's like something like a Batman movie where it's so disconnected that it, like the Burton one's even so disconnected. It's like, oh, they could have made this film last year,
Yeah.
But also it feels grounded as well. Like that was I don't know, that's a huge success on Zodiac's part. And I think Silence too, because just something about it. Obviously, the look and the fashion and everything is dated in that film, but something about it just feels, I don't know, that film feels real. It may still be dated, but it feels real. This film very much feels like more you're watching a movie. You know what I mean? A Hollywood production. Like you got your standard beats and you got your over the top villain that's actually doesn't really seem that he doesn't really sell it enough to make you feel like he's a real person.
Yeah.
Like you've got all these things that pull you out a little bit, but I still think it's interesting, like the idea of having somebody copycat all these serial killers, but they shouldn't have leaned too hard into being like, oh, this film is gonna, dive into the psychology of killers, because then it's like that breaks all that. You know what I mean? That was a disconnect. I think they should have.
It never really
It was a good nugget of an idea.
It never really went full into it. It just went into it enough.
Well, it feels like it was a little bit overpacked with all the the Will Patton subplot.
And that
really
could
went nowhere.
Because it would be different for because
if he came back into playing the third act.
Yes, because I kind of what thought happened is, because he got discharged or fired, I think, for essentially causing the death.
He got time off with pay or something.
Time off with pay, but so he got kicked out. He's gone. So I was like, oh, okay, so what's going to happen is he's gone, but then when he'll have a police scanner or something, he'll be listening to the radio, and when he hears Holly Hunter's going to do this place, he'll just show up and help. He'll either die in the process or kind of help her save the day. And that didn't happen at all. So it's
just kind of.
So my thing is like,
what did that serve?
What was it? The only reason why he was in that movie is just so he could very dumbly put his gun in, which doesn't make any sense. I don't know if any cop would ever do that. And I don't know. I just didn't get that at all.
Yeah, I really want to know. The reason I looked up trivia just earlier is because I want to know the production of this, because it does feel like I did say early versions of the script and everything, that obviously they had multiple versions, but it does not feel as well cooked. It may have been something that somebody thought of, like, we need to get this out quickly. You know what I mean? Like, let's strike while the iron's hot, because it's already been 4 years since Silence of the Lambs. Not that there wasn't a lot of films like this in the 90s. There were. But it just feels really undercooked, and you really do appreciate when something takes the time for development, like Silence and all the different versions that went through. And oh my gosh, I can't think of his name, the director's name.
Fincher?
No, of Silence of the Lambs.
Jonathan Demme.
Yeah, you watch all the behind the scenes stuff on that. You know what I mean? Like how much he went into the development of that script.
Well, and to
develop it, and
that movie was even a refinement because they had made Manhunter in the 80s with Michael Mann, that was based on the Red Dragon novel that had Hannibal Lecter. The first appearance of Hannibal Lecter on film was Brian Cox, not Anthony Hopkins. So they even had like a test run with that world to kind of figure out the tone was. And Manhunter feels very much of the 80s with neon lights or, and music and stuff. So it felt very much more of that time. Because that was back when like Michael Mann was still doing he had done Miami Vice in the 80s and these other things. And it, it felt like early Mann. It felt like the 80s as opposed to Silence of the Lambs, even though it definitely looks like the 90s. It's a little bit more timeless feel to it.
He really took... he took the flash out of it to try to not get away the story. You know what I mean? But also very specific directing and everything. This is totally serviceable serial killer film, but it feels very kind of by the numbers, just put together, and we got a film out. And it sounds like everybody did a lot of research. Sigourney Weaver was most proud of her role in this too.
Yeah,
she did a lot of research. Holly Hunter hung out with detectives for several weeks.
They were all believable in their roles. It just, I think what they did was it's just one of those weird things where like when you have
There's too many threads.
there's too many threads and there was too many characters that like honestly like the two other detectives really didn't even need the movie at all.
I know. Yeah.
Because like for them it was just kind of like since he died in a weird way, essentially to get rid of his character from the third act, and they just got rid of all those characters, did not have them involved. So it was just a very they could just take
It
them out.
didn't feel like, yeah, it's not like he was killed by the serial killer and Holly Hunter was essentially also getting revenge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like a thing where I'm also getting revenge.
It's just a random person they were arrested.
Yeah, it's like later in the movie, it's so weird. It's like if that would happen in the beginning of the film or the first act, it'd be like, okay, that's fine. This is setting things up. That's fine. This doesn't have to connect to anything else other than maybe
And like maybe it made
you know,
her gun shy about guns because like she shot,
I-
but it
didn't do anything but
it didn't
get rid of
anything.
him.
But then later on though, I guess she got an accurate shot when she she just shot to kill
she
the
took
guy.
his advice earlier, from
Yeah.
the first. Yeah, I get that, but it's like,
But
man,
it's-
and it saved Sigourney's life and stuff. But it's like it was just so half baked, kind of. And,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's hard not to compare this to Silence. They were 4 years apart.
No, but
you know what I
there's
mean. They were
also-
4 years apart, and it's like that is such a perfect film.
There is also one element that does draw pretty heavily from Silence of the Lambs. So when the killer recreates, Sigourney Weaver's character being hung in the bathroom, and then in that instance, like the killer had killed a police officer. So when Holly Hunter's character comes into the room, there's what looks like a deceased officer against the wall, and Sigourney Weaver that's
Saw.
hanging. Well, I was going to say Silence of the Lambs because Hannibal Lecter escapes by pretending to be an injured cop.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's another element that
well,
and
Watching early in this film, I was like, okay, well, I get it. The copycat he's a copycat killer. This is a copycat of Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah. Well, that's what I thought when I watched it. But
Which is interesting.
yeah.
This film feels
but I
so much like it's cool to check this film out just to see like, hey, they, somebody tried to make a Silence of the Lambs type film in the mid '90s with Sigourney Weaver and Holly Hunter.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
a
what
cool
appealed me
thing,
to it.
time
Yeah.
capsule thing. Yeah.
But I think something, talking about Seven and Silence of the Lambs, I haven't watched those in a while. But I think, too, just the way they were filmed and maybe the cinematography and the actual film they use just makes it feel more timeless. Or like this, to me, just kind of just feels like a movie from the 90s. Like it doesn't, I don't know, it just looks like
yeah,
the
because
90s.
like Silence of the Lambs, you have like the infamous like framing of the scenes with Starling and Lecter, where it's like doing like the direct look to camera stuff. So like things that people teach now in film school or all those video breakdowns of like, well, here's how you can
because it's so influential.
because it's influential and it actually like the way it was filmed shows you what the relative position and leverage is in the conversation by how it's framed and shot. So you kind of get an idea of like where the characters are in terms of how they feel and how this conversation is going by
To me,
how it's
this
shot.
just kind of felt like a very
and this
just typical
felt it was
movie
very
production.
competent, but it didn't feel like there was as much intentionality in it.
And
There-
like
there
I said, the thing that killed it, even if I could look past some of the, feel like we're overstuffed with characters or whatever, it's like at least give me some really good like suspense scenes, and the suspense really wasn't super well done. You know what I mean? Like stuff Sigourney's like, yeah, you didn't want her to die, but it wasn't. There was no like master of suspense scenes in this film, or even attempts at certain points. Like rip out some of those characters and give me some more. Give me, let me see the killer go along more and stalk his prey, and you know what I mean. Make me feel like this guy's like a big psycho, other than just like turning away and
One thing they didn't really play up on is like he has a wife. And
yeah. It's mentioned.
And she has a dog and she's in bed.
Which is kind of like references BTK and other serial killers who had like normal lives and people didn't know. And apparently there's like a weird dichotomy there between the way him and his wife were, but they never really went into it. You could tell there was some weirdness, but because she was kind of babyish and like she wouldn't. But that to me would have been more interesting. They'd focus on that why he became a serial killer. Like, it's because of this weird.
He's
like,
emasculated by his weird wife.
or maybe
and-
there's like something about mommy complex or something because he married to somebody like that.
Mommy.
But like they kind of laid pieces there. Like okay, if you know anything about serial killers, you listen to this. Okay, this kind of checks those boxes.
So
but then
they-
they
seems
Seems
never.
like there could have been 4 scenes like on the cutting room floor that they maybe shot
Yeah.
and they just
But
got
then
rid
he
of or
burned the house down. The cops
something.
went
And he
to
had shot her. I
Oh,
think.
okay, he had.
Yeah,
okay, I couldn't.
she was dead in the bed.
Okay, I couldn't remember if she was
Well,
dead
just-
or
it
not. It
seems
just never
like-
really.
Yeah, there was blood on the
It seems like a tighter version of this movie would have cut like the unnecessary Will Patton subplot and maybe even cut the partner character of Ruben, or just had that kind of relegated to a smaller role, and showed more of the killer and more of like the victims. Because sometimes if you lay out like a victim that you identify with, because like, you know, Silence of the Lambs, you have like a normal young woman who gets kidnapped and you feel bad for her. In this movie, it just kind of jumps so quickly through things. It really doesn't give you any time to do that.
Yeah, like you don't, you know, we Sigourney Weaver's, you know, assistant or whatever, you know, we see him so much, and then when he gets killed, like, oh, you only know it's him really because of his shirt. Like, you see him with him, give him the drink and everything, but later in the alley, like, unless I looked away, I'm like, is that going to be his partner? I'm assuming it's him. Like, it's like the director was really scared to face the, like, you know, to show you the insanity of these people, or just the pleasure of it. Like, the thing that it made me think of, like, what Fincher does so good in Zodiac is like the opening, basically the opening scene, the opening kill. It's just so brutal, and it really like makes you feel like, oh God, this is like maybe a deeply disturbed person, you know, and you never felt that from this killer.
Maybe the problem is that we're so depraved that we need to see all this gore nastiness.
Well, no, it's not that.
I'm just joking.
I need to feel like this character is a threat, and I never did, you know. Or you never feel like, I don't know.
Or they never really like even made you feel for the victims. Because,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, because like you just, you know, they just got maybe a second of screen time, and then the next time they're dead. So it's like either one, make me more fearful or creeped out of the killer, or if you don't want to go that route and give screen time to him for that, maybe just give you a little bit more context of the victims. So that way there's some connectivity there on either end. Like, okay, I'm scared of this guy, or I feel for this person, and there wasn't any of that.
Yes, I mean, I think that just the movie, like I said, it felt very much like, once again, not knowing if they literally went to a room and said, oh, this movie was popular, let's make our version of it.
Feel like that's what happened.
I'm sure it's probably somebody watched that film and they started writing a script and they sold it, and you know what I mean? Like, it probably got from there, and they thought, oh yeah, this would be great.
Because, you know, like, there's a lot of genres in movies. Like, they've always made crime films. I mean, you've had, you know, was it Dirty Harry, the Deadpool, there was like killer. So there's always been movies where you have cops going after a serial killer or murderer.
Well, because like Dirty Harry was kind of like based off the Zodiac.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have all these different things that did happen. It's just they didn't have kind of the heightened Dirty Harry-esque characters in a lot of them, and they kind of got grounded and more realistic. But just like, I think a big difference is like, this movie, you know, has a good cast. It's just there wasn't as much memorable about it. I mean, and like with Seven, you remember like because even though it didn't even show you some of the stuff, just the description and the brief glimpses you did see evoked imagery in your mind.
There was a lot of stuff that creeped you out in that film.
Well, especially like the sloth scene, like that's something that I still think is.
You're talking about Seven. Did you say Zodiac? Oh, I thought you said
Seven.
Zodiac.
I said Seven?
No. I couldn't remember.
Okay, I meant Seven. Yeah, just like it evokes so much imagery with things that it didn't even show you a full view of, that you came away thinking the movie was far grittier and grosser than it really was. And I think, you know, not every movie has to go for that tone, but it's just it just when you see like Sigourney Weaver in the cast and stuff, like, it's always a little bit of a missed opportunity to do more with it, or to have a little bit more to say. Because I do think in like today's world, it is perfectly. So recently there was the news about the Momo challenge crap, which was like some statue that was like a Japanese like creepy statue. People have taken images of it, and then the claim was that, and I think they first popped up in like 2018 in like the summer, like overseas, and it was never confirmed it was actually involved with anything. The idea was like that the Momo challenge was a variation of the blue whale challenge. And the Blue Whale Challenge was something inspired by a Black Mirror episode, where I think the idea in the Blue Whale Challenge is you text a number, or a number texts you, and then it tells you it gives you instructions of things you have to do, or else they'll expose personal information about you. And it starts off relatively innocuous of like, oh, watch a horror movie at nighttime. And then it ends with like you having to kill others or yourselves. Once again, mostly just gibberish hoax stuff that didn't happen. But then the Momo challenge was where there's like some image of a statue they said has been spliced into kids' videos that tells them to kill themselves or their parents.
Because it took stuff that had happened on YouTube with other things, and then just kind of blew it up into that.
Well, the first
but now at this point, people can easily
Well, no.
slice that in.
So
Yeah.
so I saw
you could will it into existence.
so like that became like a big. I saw people who are parents on my feed start talking about that, and all the articles they were sharing were from UK tabloid sites and stuff.
Yeah.
And then eventually it got to be US based sites, and all of your local news channels and CNNs and everybody was posting all this fake news about Momo. And then after it became like a big deal, then people started sharing videos that said like, oh, this was being spliced into our kids' videos. And they're hoaxes. They're not things that they actually found on YouTube, because no one's ever shared a link to any of these videos. It's they just went and edited the video up themselves and then record a video of them watching it on their phone and say, oh, this is real.
Yeah.
And
Well,
But
apparently
now you could easily just edit it in there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like now it can be done. Like
so, yeah, so like it's the one that I saw everybody sharing on Facebook, it's a dude watching it on his phone, but it's not in the YouTube app. So it's like, well, if you're not watching, you're just watching it like on the player on your phone, because the YouTube app looks a specific way. So it's like, no, this is fake. Don't show me a video of you watching it. Share the link. Let me see it, but it's just fake. So I do think in today's world, though, it is not all that unlikely that somebody could try to copycat stuff that they've seen. I don't think they'd be very successful.
I mean, everybody's always, you know what I mean? I mean, I think, I don't know what copycat, but, you know, serial killers obviously sometimes do that also for the fame. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah, I mean,
copycat
that's-
school shooters, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's always,
And one thing that was kind of caught my eye too in this movie is this is pre Monica Lewinsky blue dress, but you have the red dress, and because that was such a focal point of the film.
yeah.
So it's just funny because in '95, just a '90s movie that picks out a certain color dress and makes it that was involved in a
It's
certain act.
also like Alice from Resident Evil.
yeah, really. But it's just funny.
or
though,
like on The Matrix when Neo sees the woman in the red dress.
Yeah,
I think it's just like a red dress has always been seen as somewhat like sultry or something, but that one wasn't like low cut and
that
revealing.
was
That
just
was
like,
professional business.
But I just thought it was kind of funny though, because I was thinking like, oh yeah, because of Monica Lewinsky. But I was like, oh wait a minute, this happened before that. So like this movie came out
Yeah,
before that, so
Derek.
it wasn't. But it just
he wasn't even president. You know what? He was
Yeah, he was
president.
president.
Yeah, it was
94.
95. So yeah, that was.
Yeah, but it just when you think about that, like, oh yeah, because of that, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, that hadn't happened yet, so that just whatever. But it's just funny that was such a focal point of the movie, and it was really just like a business dress.
And the
that-
guy was just like, "Oh, look at this dress! Look at this dress! I'm gonna make you wear this dress and try to recreate this murder,
Yeah.
or not even murder, this attempted murder." So I guess in that aspect, he succeeded because he failed, because the original killer did not kill her. So he
Yeah.
copycatted it.
yeah, he did.
Oh shit! That's what the point of the movie was. That he was a copycat, and then he even copycatted the killer that didn't succeed.
Yeah, but then at the end we get a not really a post credit scene, but a credit scene of the
Henry
Avengers.
Connick Jr.
Yeah, he's like,
just
oh, you
looking-
didn't kill them, boy. You go to because he did the most like exaggerated Southern accent, and
He's
then
just looking into cameras.
but then he recruited somebody else to try to kill.
Yeah, so
Sigourney
he was in
Weaver.
on helping, you know, try to kill
Yeah,
her.
he was the one that.
My wife, she watched this with me too, and the thing she just like couldn't stand is at the end of the film because he was talking,
Yeah.
and then she was like, "Oh my god!" I'm like, I was like, "Wait, I got to rewind it. I don't know what he said." Because at least on our TV, which is like, I don't know, maybe a 55-inch, you could see the black.
Yes, on his teeth.
so clearly.
Yeah.
he's looking right in the screen. So I imagine on a huge theatrical screen. I mean, maybe it wasn't as clear if the screen was.
Well, something
you know,
I
not
think
bright.
something that happens with a lot of movies that becomes way more noticeable on a big HD or 4K screen at home than it did in the theater is in the theater, the screen, assuming you're seeing it on a big screen and not like the small, crappy screens, the screen is so large, your eye isn't typically drawn to one element of the screen because there's so much going on where you have to scan the screen
Yeah.
to watch. So it's a lot easier to not notice a big glaring thing that sitting at home on a TV is far
But
more
I wonder in
noticeable.
this film, just because his face is so locked into the camera, I mean, it is tight. It's like
Yeah.
from his bottom lip to like, you know, above his eyebrows. And it sits there for like 20,
No, it's like
45 seconds
yeah,
or something.
It's almost a minute.
And he's got his mouth half open.
Yeah, so I
like,
would wonder if people
like
say
that
anything
just
about
kills
that.
the impact of the film too. Like, oh, you're supposed to be leaving on this note. And now I'm just looking at their bad, you know, job of hiding his teeth.
Yeah.
I mean, a real method actor would just get part of their teeth
Yeah,
knocked
knock it
off.
out.
I mean,
That
come on.
or they would just get they go all Rami Malek and just get the huge, you know, teeth things.
And didn't Jim Carrey? He actually has a chip in his tooth, so he took out the coverage for Dumb and Dumber. Or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, so So the movie, you know, like there's some decent stuff throughout, but nothing that makes it a super memorable movie. And you know, it's more of a time capsule of that time.
That some people
and
seem
era.
very fond of as far as reviews
And
go.
I could definitely get if you watch this movie without all that additional context. If you watched that in the '90s and you hadn't seen Silence of the Lambs, and you know Seven
if
wasn't your
you-
cup of tea,
Or if you had, I would assume that I'd have to go look, but there's probably a lot of movies that followed that formula right after just because of the success. And this one may just been good.
Better than
so
some of those,
better
yeah.
than some of them. So that maybe why? Because if you have like 100 copies of something, or you know, like copycats, and one of them's good, but it's not great, but it's good, it's going to elevate it so much higher because it's then going to be graded on a curve. You know, because like, oh, I've seen 30 of these movies that have been that way, but this one's good because like
Yeah.
Roger Ebert even was like very high on it.
yeah. So then, like I said, so like getting into like giving our final thoughts on this movie. So in terms of like what I would give this out of 10, so like a user score of 6.6 and a Metacritic of 54. Like I think it's like a 6. Like, you know, it's well executed. You know, I don't know. It's like technically well done. It's got good actors that do work with what they're given. But you know, this movie could have easily, with you know a little bit tighter script and a little bit more a few more things that cause you to be invested in the characters, it could have easily, you know, been an 8 or 9.
Yeah, all-time classic.
But just the way that it kind of executed is more of just a movie that's kind of forgotten to time. Now it may be something that sees a resurgence because it's on a streaming platform, and people are like, oh, it's that lady that's in all those movies. Because it is funny now when people refer to like Sandra Bullock as the Bird Box lady.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I mean, she's
Miss
also in,
Congeniality. Come on.
no, from Demolition Man.
No, Speed.
Speed, Demolition Man.
Was she in Speed 1 and 2 or just 1?
She was in 1 and 2. Keanu
was only
Reeves,
one.
Wow.
yeah, had the good
Because she had to
fortune.
drive the boat.
It was like the cruise ship or whatever.
Yeah.
And Willem
Speed 2,
Dafoe.
Cruise Control.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Yeah.
what it was called?
Yeah. And then there was like The Net and like a bunch of those romantic comedies that she was in.
I wonder how a Speed 3 with her and Keanu Reeves would do
Reeves?
now if they brought that back.
I don't
Gangbusters.
know. I mean, what would they be on? Like they're in
Airplane.
They're in an autonomous car.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
Someone
it, had to be,
hijacks
no, it
it.
has to be an airplane. Because they already done planes, and or they already done like a vehicle.
But here's the thing, though: in the real world,
Submarine,
in the
yeah.
real world, people have been ran over by autonomous cars they're testing. Now it's relatively few and far between, but there is a real fear of that. So there is something you could say about that. I
And
guess.
Dumb and Dumber guy was in. He died.
Oh, Jeff Daniels.
Yeah, Jeff Daniels got blown up.
Yeah. So Derek, what would you give the movie out of?
I'm right with you. I mean, it's a 6. You know, like, 'cause it wasn't bad. It's a movie that I enjoyed while watching it. You know, I wasn't like, oh, but it just, because of some of the stuff in it, like the way the detective was killed in it was so left field. It's like,
Late in the movie, too.
late in the movie, and it's like, you know, and then it's like, well, they only killed him that way because I guess they
to go for shock factor.
I guess for shock factor, and
Because
they
there
didn't-
wasn't really any buildup or foreshadowing.
Yeah,
in it.
and like I guess the way they were mimicking the murders, like it wouldn't have made any sense for him to be killed by the serial killer unless there was some type of altercation. But I think looking at how kind of nerdy the serial killer was, that maybe he could have took him. I don't know, but
they need him out of the way because
Yeah.
otherwise it doesn't make a ton of sense that this
And then-
serial killer could.
And again, like, why have him in the film? Like,
Yeah.
you know, why? I mean, I guess she would have a partner, but you know what I mean? Like,
Or just
she's
relegate
strong
him
enough
to-
carry this film by herself.
Yeah, so relegate him, give her a less attractive partner that doesn't seem like they're, you know, capable of being like a co-lead in the film.
Yeah.
Give her more of just a make it a thing where she's the hardworking, competent one, and her partner is the schlubby dude who gets all the credit.
Because there's so many.
There's a plot point.
And I'm pretty sure if we thought really hard, we could probably think of a perfect '90s actor to fit into that role. Because there's probably guys that was their role, you know. But yeah, I don't.
Norm from Cheers.
Yeah, really. You could have done that.
Give her Reginald Bell Johnson, who is, you know, from Family Matters and Die Hard.
Oh yeah, just have it
yeah.
in there,
And then have him just
Yeah.
be the cop who's
Yeah.
like the happy-go-lucky. Well, I don't think anything wrong happened. She accidentally fell off the building, and you know,
Yeah, but it just to me that's kind of where the movie kind of like, huh? Like, because it was, like I said, it wasn't a bad movie. I think that to me makes it more memorable because they just killed one of the main characters.
That's one of the most memorable films scenes in the film because it's like something actually happens that's surprising almost.
Yeah,
you know?
because like who would have thought that if he was going to die in a way, he would just get murdered by a character that had one line of dialogue and was in the film for less than 5 minutes.
He died what he loved doing, eating donuts.
And it wasn't even
he died holding a box of donuts.
and it wasn't even making a statement. It's like on The Wire, there was like a prominent character that died in a way, and the statement that it made was, anybody with a gun can kill anybody. It's usually not some big glorified, battle at the OK Corral that takes somebody down. It's just some rando person that sees them in the wrong place and shoots them.
And that's I think is the kind of again, they didn't take that.
There was no messaging
all,
of that,
but it was kind of interesting because that's how it happened. Instead of like this grand death, he just kind of.
I think it was smart for them to have one of the officers in the situation to also be Asian.
Yeah.
Only because that would have been the only Asians in the film. Would it seem like some people go,
very
going crazy?
stereotypical
the triad gang.
Yeah. It's like, okay, they popped up for no reason to just say, hey, look out, because they could just go crazy and shoot somebody. Thankfully, I feel like they probably, hopefully had the foresight to like, hey, let's have somebody that's also Asian, at least know that, hey, we're not just trying to like shove everybody in this.
Well, then there was like the thing earlier in the movie where the sergeant or whatever tells like Will Patton's character, like, do you want to get off of Chinatown duty?
Yeah.
So I guess they were kind of laying that out some, but
yeah, and they said the trivia said something too about I feel like they kind of said something about Holly Hunter going to a school I don't know. There was some sort of thing laying the groundwork also that stayed in this film that was, I think, tied into the original ending of the film as well too. Like there's some things that like don't really line up.
Yeah.
I give it a 6 too. Like I was right there with you guys. It's a cool little footnote. There's a million other films I need to see and I need to watch. You know what I mean? That like some classic films that I haven't seen, and it's not like, oh, I have to only watch the best of the best films because there's so many. So it's cool to watch, but don't go out of your way if you've got a laundry list of films where you're like, I've really been needing to see this, and now this is on Netflix or this is on Prime, something you want to see. Maybe get to those films first if there's something you're looking forward to, but. Absolutely, if you're interested in either of these actors' works, because this is a role I've never seen Sigourney Weaver in.
And this was not like they weren't scene chewing. They actually gave an effort, and they did. Because a lot of times you get movies like this where the actor just kind of shows up, and it's like, and this was not that.
They needed the scene, but I almost thought the scene when she's trying to get her newspaper was pretty funny too.
Yeah, that
reminded me of. Have you guys seen Benchwarmers?
Yeah,
when Nick Swartzen, he's afraid to go outside.
Yeah,
and there's like somebody drops off some food or something, and I think he has a broom or something, and he's like scared to go outside. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. So ironically enough, one of those the Hulu Into the Dark series, the Blumhouse series, where it's like those movies each month. The one that was for November has a girl that's agoraphobic, and her dad's played by Dermot Mulroney. So the guy that was the Detective Reuben in this one he's in a movie where his daughter's agoraphobic and has to get like mail or something.
I think I read trivia too that he's also in Fincher's Zodiac.
Okay,
as a detective, maybe. I think.
One thing though, just quick note. I know we're wrapping the podcast up. Something that they gave us with her agoraphobia is that she would have panic attacks, and then that she'd have to breathe into a bag and she'd pass out. And I figured that would come into play later on. Because to me, it would have made more sense is like if she had gotten out and then something was going on and then she just had one of those spells, and then that would be how the killer. And then there's like they laid this groundwork for stuff, and like it never happened. But again, now that you've said, what's her name, Helen Horny, like for that scene, like
Helen Horny Michael,
like it just that there's a certain stuff you're like, this is bad.
Well, then they just.
My wife looked up the specific definition of that too, and. The definition she found for agoraphobia is somebody who's afraid of having a panic attack.
Yeah.
But, we kind of thought, somebody who's kind of afraid to be outside, around people in stressful situations, which is, I guess, kind of the same thing because that can onset a panic attack for some reason. But that's a weird thing. Like, I'm not saying anything, but like, that's a horrible thing because like your fear of panic attacks, he seems like if he even like was worried about having one, he would start having one. You know what I mean? Like it seems like a super sensitive thing.
I just kind of figured that would like... Because that was such a big moment. Okay, that's gonna come into play.
Well, and two, like to me, it's somewhat telling if the original concept for the movie was that the ending would not tie in to the beginning.
Yeah.
Because
Because
the
that's
entire
what works in the film.
because the
think.
entire thing to me is like this inciting incident that causes her character to have all these issues and to go from being like a confident, professional, successful person to being like a shut-in that has panic attacks. For her to have to confront a recreation of that event should be like a major emotional beat, and it should be really part of the fabric of the story. But if it sounds like that was just kind of like a reshoot that they changed the direction a little bit with, that tells you that maybe there wasn't as much thought on that element.
And two, I was hoping that Holly Hunter was going to learn something. So when she goes into that bathroom, obviously before that though, that she's like walking around with her bulletproof vest with her shirt open to let you know she has one on. Like she's like
and she
walking around.
she makes the comment that like it not showing off her cleavage or something.
But when she walks, so you think, okay, well, she's gonna get shot here soon. Like she's gonna get shot.
Yeah, it's the whole don't show it.
And I don't want to say like, oh, it would have felt cheap if she would have got shot and had it on, because I mean she's a police officer, so I think it would have been fine if they didn't like show that. But honestly, when she went in and he takes a gun from her the same way, I thought, oh, cool. Maybe through this process of working with Sigourney, she has learned to pay attention to certain things, and maybe she knows enough to know that he's recreating this. She knows how that original thing happened. Maybe this gun only had like 3 bullets in it, and she's tricking him to take an unloaded gun. You know what I mean? I thought,
Yeah.
cool. She's like has studied him. Sigourney Weaver's rubbed off, so this is almost like a trap. Like and no, it's just she walked right into it like an idiot.
And I guess the only thing
And the same thing happened again.
I guess the only thing that she learned was you shoot to kill or whatever.
It's weird that she shot into a closet too.
Yeah.
Like knowing that like he could have had another victim in there. Like that was such a weird thing as well.
Yeah.
Again, this film does not feel super highly well researched. It feels researched enough, and and that's when these films really go above and beyond and really make you feel like they are terrifying, because they feel like, oh, this is to the T. You know what I mean?
Well, I think
as close to reality as possible within being inside of a film.
I think too, though, like where this movie falls apart is that the beginning feels really researched and fleshed out and thought of, but then in the moments when it matters, like this, it just kind of goes back to.
Feels like a CSI or something.
It feels
Just kind of
like a
like it's fine.
Well
it's
before
fine.
those
It's
shows
entertaining. You like
existed.
the actresses, like you like
But
everybody
now,
in it. But
I just want to make a bunch of movies where we have characters in it that just get killed.
I'm
in really
surprised.
awful
I'm surprised.
ways.
Like CBS hasn't rebooted this as a procedural targeted at the 55 to 70-year-old age.
you
demographic.
remember Copycat? Well, Sigourney's back.
Sigourney's back and she's tired of this crap.
All right. So I think they can wrap up our discussion of Copycat. If you're listening via iTunes, do us a huge favor and leave a review there. That helps other people find the podcast. You can find all the stuff we're doing at housewithastore.com. Find links to all of our social media accounts, to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. The short film They Knock is out, which Chad directed and we just released recently. In our Facebook page, we've shared where at least one site has talked about it, so you can see what they had to say. I think that was pophorror.com and looked at it. So you can find links there to all that stuff. I think our short film share that was part of that Bloody Disgusting, that ended in February, so I think that's done now, and I think that's gone. So, or I think it will be soon. So that'll be gone, but you can still watch it on our site.
Probably.
Yeah, because I think their new thing was they would put a collection of shorts together and leave it up for 1 month, and then at the end of the month take it back down, so that if people have distribution deals or things going on, their shorts not tied up somewhere they have no control over it, which is cool. But yeah, you can check out They Knock on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. And then if you want to find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Instagram at the William Caps.
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at MetaWorldDerek.
And I'm at Blevin Sean on Twitter.
And that'll wrap up this episode of the House with Astore podcast. Thanks for listening.
House